Hello and welcome to Feedback for the week of April 21st, 2010, the day after 420, which I just learned has nothing to do with police code, meaning smoking in progress, which I now realize only a stoner could believe is an actual police code or some sort of crime. Anyway, irrelevant. We're introducing Patrick Klepek, Abby Heppy, and Sterling McGarvey. How are you guys?
Pretty good.
Video games.
Yay, video games.
I'm a little disappointed I'm not in Hawaii right now.
Yeah, that's right. We tried
Yeah,
to
that must
pretend
really
you didn't
suck for
exist
you.
last week.
Yeah, I'm in a studio.
So, yeah, you were Captivate 2010. This is a yearly thing that Capcom puts on. Now, to be fair, last year I went to, was it Monte Carlo?
Yeah,
it was Monte Carlo.
I like how
Yes.
you can't quite remember. What was that wonderful place I went
They
last
switched
year?
between Europe
You
and...
know, to be fair, I think Hawaii sounds a little bit better. Monte Carlo really is for very, 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 very rich people. And nothing's walkable. You need to
Right.
get into a Ferrari to go to it. So it is gorgeous, beautiful, kind of like shockingly austere. But Hawaii is like, oh, look, I have flip-flops on. I'm going there. It's a turtle. Was that your experience?
Yeah, that and Lost stuff. So, but I know how much you love Lost. So
I so don't understand that. I mean, you didn't go to the set or anything, did you?
I went to a couple of the locations.
Our Lost
They were
is
walking
Project
distance.
Runway.
Yes.
That's what we
I
come in
hate
and
to say
discuss.
it. Yeah.
I don't
And
hate
Top
to say
Chef.
it. It's a
and
great
Top
show. Top Chef.
No,
and Top
I
Chef
love Project
Masters.
Runway.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I'm not gonna
Lost,
judge.
It's got a smoke monster. What is your show, Sterling?
It's Bryant Park week, okay?
Actually, funny you ask. I feel like I'm an old man. We watch 60 Minutes, and my wife likes Antiques Roadshow.
I love Antiques
Antiques
Roadshow.
Roadshow is excellent television, especially for that budget. You have something that's fascinating and educational.
What am I
No.
doing on this
And then there's
show?
Pawn Stars. It's like the seedier Vegas-y one.
You're all
Yeah,
about
I've seen
smoke
that
monsters and vaults and hatches.
I'm fit right in with 420 apparently.
Yes, that's what I think it is. So let's talk about Captivate, because despite the fact there was sun and fun, you actually were there to see some games. The big one was the reveal of Marvel vs. Capcom 3.
Yeah, it's been a decade essentially waiting for this. It sounds like a lot of that decade was essentially tied to the explosion of Marvel. You know, since we saw Marvel vs. Capcom 2, the wait between 3, Marvel is not just a comics force anymore. They are a massive entertainment force
Yes.
owned by Disney.
Yes.
So the dynamics, I think, of the relationship between a company that licenses, sort of Marvel games to the extent that a game like Marvel's Capcom, I think that influenced why it's taken so long to get to that point. Marvel and Capcom both sort of alluded to that when they originally presented Marvel's Capcom 3, saying, we wish we could have talked about this a long time ago, but this stuff takes a very long time to
I
get
mean, those
together.
are individual characters that they would have to be licensing.
Yes.
And, obviously there's some very tricky things in terms of characters that might not be sort of, in the forefront of the Marvel universe that can be challenging.
It's a big thing they were talking about. Is like, the characters that are big in movies right now, the characters that are big in the comics are pushing, it's all tied together. It's not just, it's not just necessarily what's good for gameplay. There are a lot of other considerations that go into that.
Now, who is making the game? Because it's not Ono-san.
No, he is finishing up Super Street Fighter 4 and currently in every possible interview pushing the idea of a Darkstalkers game.
Wow.
Which is not actually in development, but as Capcom told me, well, if he puts it in every interview, he hopes that project will come true.
Yeah, if I say it, it will be
Sure.
true. I mean, just in terms of the characters of Darkstalkers and what they are now able to do with these engines for the fighting games, for visuals alone, I would be very interested to see that game.
We're actually
That's what
already seeing that with Marvel's Capcom 3 because Morgan was in the initial
Yes.
trailer for that. And so, yeah, at Captivate, they showed a 23, 24-second, essentially cinematic trailer, but using the in-game models that they developed for the game. And just based on the trailer alone, like, it's, if you wanted high-res Tatsunoko versus Capcom, you're like, why aren't they porting this? Don't worry, because, this is the game you wanted. Like, the comic flourishes looks so impressive in that cinematic trailer that if that can carry over to the game, I'm really excited about it.
I don't even
already.
care. We still play it on Dreamcast upstairs, Marvel vs. Capcom 2.
Yeah, I mean, that was a seminal game.
It's so much fun.
Sterling, I know that this is making you very, very happy.
I got very giddy when I was watching the trailer.
Say that more flat, 'cause it really
Okay.
works.
No, it's-
I got giddy.
I got so excited when I came in this morning.
That was creepy.
Yeah, that was kind of weird.
My throat's a little scratchy. You'll have to excuse me. Now, when I was watching the trailer, there's this moment when Hulk is fighting and there's this shadowy figure and he throws it down. All of a sudden, the camera pans around. And I was like, "Oh my God, it's Chris Redfield!" I fanboyed out. I'm not gonna front. Right now, as you're talking about characters, in the back of my head, I'm thinking, in 10 years, Capcom has launched a ton of IPs. And I looked at what they did with Capcom versus Tatsunoko, and I'm like, oh my God, wouldn't it be cool if, like, the wolf from Okami, I could, like, summon the wolf and, like, the sun would come out and beat up Hulk or something?
Or Beautiful Joe shows up.
Oh,
Yeah.
Beautiful Joe or
Be a good
Dante. And I'm just like, the amount of crossover going on in my head right now is probably even more significantly more monumental than what Capcom will probably actually be able to do.
They've said, the producer whose name's escaping me, but he was the producer on Tatsunoko.
Yes.
He's doing Marvel's Capcom 3. I mean, they said at Captivate that they have roughly a little over 30 characters that they have in the game or are considering right now, but it's really essentially a race to the release date. Like, they're releasing next spring. Whatever they can finish between then, like, we would love to have 50 characters.
Yeah.
And balance is less of an issue with the Marvel's Capcom game. It's just a matter of the back and forth with Marvel in terms of figuring out those characters and then getting those into the game, because it's much more, as Seth Killian, who is a special advisor for the Street Fighter series, essentially all the fighting games at Capcom, and is at Marvel's Capcom 3. He was like, Marvel's Capcom 1 and 2, they got to steal a lot of sprites from a lot of other games. And so it's different this time around when everything has to be built from scratch. So, like, Marvel's Capcom 2 could have a bajillion things because they're just pulling them from other games that were all the same sort of assets. And it's okay if it pixelates out. Like, that's acceptable. And it's not anymore. So they have... But even still, like, 30 characters is a lot. And no doubt that there's, will probably be a Super Marvel vs. Capcom 3 and downloadable content. Like, that's going to be a huge part of these games, most likely. And it's going to be it's going to be really fun to see. Like, it's clearly they're going to be doling out these characters over the next year.
Yes.
Like, announcing a character a month, or Comic-Con will probably be really huge for this
they're
game.
Blow
Yes.
it out for
Yeah, I
Comic-Con, guaranteed.
So,
guaranteed.
Hey, it's the gift that keeps on giving when we have slow news days.
There
we
you
can
go.
jump all over another character reveal. I want to read this comment from Louis Kami, or Lusakami, I don't know. That line, quote, "We want to expand that audience, reach out to new people, and there are a lot of Marvel fans who aren't familiar with fighting games. It worries me a lot. I admit that I was never very good at fighting games, but I still enjoy them just as much as a true hardcore. Games like this are for the hardcore. Instead of game developers lower the standards for the casual, make the casual raise to the hardcore." You have played Tatsunoko versus Capcom probably more than everyone else here. I mean, would you consider that game to somehow be dumbed down for the sake of the casual, since it looks like they're somewhat using the model of that game for this?
Not at all. I think for what Tatsunoko versus Capcom offers, it doesn't have the number of attack options that Street Fighter 4 has, but I think there's a lot of fun and depth to it. And I would just ask Louis Kami, like, do you remember the last Marvel fighting game? Because I do. It was that awful EA game. You can only go up from there.
That's a very, very good point.
As far as I'm concerned, I'm no longer concerned about trying to make people who don't play video games punish themselves to try to play them. I think that there's a balance that you can strike, and I think that's what made the Marvel vs. Capcom game so good, is that there's a level of skill where if you invested the time, you could get really good at it, you could learn the nuances, but if you just wanted to tap buttons and have more fun, I found it always to be a lot more rewarding than if I played, like, a Tekken game.
I mean, I think Soul Calibur was another game that kind of fits into that you could do some very cool things by inadvertently hitting the right buttons, but if you're going to really play to win, you have to kind of start to learn what you're doing.
I always picked Kalik. He's the one with the giant bow staff in Soul Calibur, because I could just be an asshole and just swing his bow staff around and screw everyone up.
Yeah, so you're just the Kalik of people.
Yep.
That's
I'm okay
that's
with
good,
that.
Patrick.
I'll raise you that.
Choosing
Give you
Christy
a
and Tekken. It's like, that's not even
I was
fair.
gonna say I'll raise you a maxi.
Yeah, but you know what? I always, when we play upstairs on the Dreamcast a lot, and I am totally button mashery at that game, and I still have so much fun. And we have dudes that are way better than I am at it, but like, I sometimes I win, and I always have a good time
That's
playing.
the fun of that game,
Yeah.
is that, I mean...
Something ridiculous will happen, and I'll enjoy myself.
Yeah, the philosophy with Super Street Fighter 4 and Street Fighter 4 and with Marvel's Capcom 3 is they've used the same line over and over. It's depth without complexity. It's like, you can have a game that has a lot to it if you take the time to learn it, but that on its surface, you can do a lot of really cool things with that. That's what Tatsunoko does, even in Street Fighter 4. Like, you can button mash in Street Fighter 4.
You
or
won't
just
win,
have,
though.
just have a base knowledge of moves, and you can do flashy things. And that's what they said is one of the big struggles with this game, is that the audience for Marvel's Capcom 3 is exponentially bigger than 1 and 2.
I think that the quote is just a little bit overly articulated, and that's why I can see why when reading that you might have some concern. I think they overstated it unnecessarily, and it's like, no, we're not dumbing it down. We're just going to make it accessible. But yeah, it's easy Easy to learn, hard to master. You know, it's the classic.
Pretty much.
Let's talk about one other game, Dead Rising 2. This one has me excited.
Me too.
You actually saw the co-op, which I've gathered when we were doing our talk about is what we would think the co-op would be like.
Yeah, whatever you think Dead Rising 2 co-op would be is just another main character in there screwing around in the world. So it's exactly what you expected, but that's exactly what we wanted. So,
What I want, yeah.
I mean, it's just they copied Chuck Green as the main character in 2, pasted him into your game, and one of the questions people asked was like, well, why didn't you create another character so that there was some sort of narrative explanation? They're like, well, A, who cares about the narrative explanation in a zombie game? B, the Chuck Green that you bring in is your Chuck Green. So it's kind of like a Fable sort of thing. So when you jump in, the clothes that you're wearing from your game experience are the clothes you're wearing when you jump in. The weapons you have are your weapons. And all the experience you get, all the weapons you get in someone else's game, you get to bring back with you. So it's, they don't really care that it doesn't make any sense in the narrative sense, but it's more fun because you get to bring all of that back into your world when you jump back in, especially given that Dead Rising 2 seems to be keeping the theme of Dead Rising 1 in that you will be playing the game over and over again.
What were the saves like?
They won't comment. They said it would be improved.
Okay.
But they acknowledged that people had issues with the first game, but outside of that they weren't.
Yeah, didn't
they were
show
very
that.
deliberately not talking about it. So I don't know exactly what that. It's hard to say what that means, really.
So that's actually unfun games here as a comment right to that. It's sort of like Oblivion. Based on the character you create, you'll get stuck on a very early story mission and you need to do side quests to level up. That's fine because there's no time limit. But in a game like Dead Rising, there is a time limit, and no one knew you were expected to fail the first time. I think that it wasn't just there was something fundamentally wrong with the game. They just didn't telegraph what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
Sterling, sorry.
I think part of that was a design decision. I mean, at the time, they were working with this relatively new hardware and setting something up, and the groundwork has been laid. The expectations have been laid. That's why I thought it was funny when you were talking about the lack of plot. The first thing I thought was, who'll care about that plot? There's some kid going, Capcom, you're ruining my fan fiction. The whole everything with inserting a character and not having a plot. You're fighting zombies. What else do you need?
It's a very nice objective. It's I must live.
Yes.
End of story.
I think it's simple.
But yeah, the save game stuff. It's like once I knew how I was with Dead Rising, we were all, I think most of the complaints were essentially you're playing it wrong, and that's because Capcom failed to explain it right.
Yeah.
But the way you were supposed to play that was get as far as you can. Don't worry about dying. When you die, you just start over, and you'll rush through those same sections 10 times faster with the new moveset. Yeah. And they just didn't explain that. So I almost wonder
as gamers, we're trained to not want to die.
Yeah, and I almost wonder if that won't change too much as it'll just be you'll have an understanding that's what you're supposed to do when you play.
I think one of the few things, if they could have changed one thing in Dead Rising with that, is that if you could have restarted a little bit later. There was a little bit of a slog in that beginning, and that's what was always my turnoff. Like, oh, I don't really want to redo it again. There was that point where it's like, okay, now I'm back. I can do a lot of stuff. This is cool. But yeah, it's just don't penalize me with boredom. That's a very, very bad thing to do in game design. Let's talk about the March NPDs. Because they came out.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Let's do the number. The great big, competition console wars.
Top-selling system.
The DS, as a result of the DS IXL, had a freaking record.
700,000
I'm part of that.
Way to go, Abby. You're part of... I don't even know what part of that number you are.
I'm not going to say it's a problem, but you're part of it.
You're part of
but
it.
then I brought my DS in the office, my DSi XL, and everybody was like, "Ooh,
are you loving it?
Oh, the screen is so big. I love it.
It's awesome. Kind of great.
It's great. It's got a huge screen. I'm really excited about some of the DSiWare games coming out for it, mostly Photo Dojo. And no, it's great. I love it. And every time I've shown it to people, they're like, "This is awesome.
Yeah,
this is really cool." And I should probably
can't find
get one.
fault with it. It's just like, oh my lord, for what, the fourth iteration of a piece of hardware when there's already been acknowledgement of like a brand new edition coming late this year or early next year.
Yeah, and when my parents...
What was that noise?
I'm turning into a turkey. Except it's an asphyxiating
that
turkey.
was not a turkey. It was
strangling. Yeah, being asphyxiated, sure. But when I brought my parents here and they came by to my apartment, which is always like super nerve-wracking, and I've got this great setup and TV and all my consoles and everything, the only thing they cared about at all was the DSi XL. They're like, "That's actually quite neat. Oh, look at this." And like they totally had fun checking it out.
Bright, shiny screen.
Yeah.
Hey, people like shiny things.
So, other than that, the hardware sales were, about where they are usually a month to month. Although the PSP just being less than 1,000 over the PlayStation 2.
That's
Yeah.
a
That's
little
pretty
rough.
continues to
paltry.
be
Well, the
pretty
other is
disconcerting.
the PlayStation 3 is only a little bit behind the Xbox 360, but if the PS3s were more available and the shortage that's been happening wasn't, I mean, that they could have very easily exceeded Microsoft.
Look at the,
Yeah.
the software
look,
sales.
Look at the number one game. You know, it was a PS3 exclusive. The PS3 has a much smaller install base, but God of War 3, 1.10 million. I mean, that's with only 2 weeks, I believe, of March that the game was released.
When's the last time that a PS3 game was number one? B, when's the last time there were
Outselling Pokemon.
three PS3
Yeah, that's no
PS3
joke.
games on the charts?
And there's another exclusive, MLB 10 The Show.
Yeah.
It's also, I mean, this is very, they clearly seem to have reinvigorated their base. They just need to expand their base.
4 PS3 games.
Yeah, it's. I mean, Final Fantasy. Yeah, the
Battlefield,
PS3 version
MLB,
of Final
yeah.
Fantasy 13 exceeded that for the 360.
Yeah, I find it
By a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard to really discern what that is. If that's, I didn't play Final Fantasy 13, but had I bought it, I would have bought it on PS3 because I don't consider platform.
It's honestly not worth it for the achievements on 360.
It's not.
Because, well, no, first of all, by the time you've beaten the game, you have like 300. Like, and then the game keeps going. I mean, they're brutal. I am 63 hours into Final Fantasy.
Abby.
13.
What?
Stop, child. Stop.
Hold on.
I love
also,
the battle system. I'm sorry, I really do.
So I have to say, for those 63 hours,
12 other games.
it's 63 hours of
did.
ambivalence I've
don't
seen from
stop.
Abby. It's amazing.
Oh yeah, it was my 63 hours of ambivalence where Adam would just walk by my desk and go, "You having fun yet?" And I'm like, "I don't know." God, okay, but I gotta kill this thing. Like I love their battle system, and I have played way too many hours.
Now it's
but
too late.
Yeah, I know.
But I mean, I wonder, like, 'cause if I played that, I would have bought on PS3. I wonder how much that is sort of that's a PlayStation franchise effect.
Okay, how long
think it's a big part
into
of
the
it.
existence of the PS3 did Microsoft make the announcement?
It
It was 2 E3s ago,
it was
wasn't it?
E3 08, so that was about 18 months into the life cycle of the
I
PS3.
mean, for a lot of people, they always assumed Final Fantasy is only going to be on the PS3, and that was why they made their initial investment. I don't know. Maybe that's it.
And
Maybe it's not.
I never got the impression that Microsoft, they didn't really, unlike some other third-party games like Modern Warfare, put a lot of push behind it. To them, just getting the game was
good
the win.
enough. Was
Like
good enough.
that's one less franchise they can mark off.
They did do that nudge during the NBA All-Star game, though, where they kept kind of bundling and doing the ads. They're like, hey, we're going to have Final Fantasy 13, and we're going to
Yeah.
have a bundle. Buy it on 360, that kind of nudge. The big surprise to me, though, wasn't necessarily Final Fantasy. It was Bad Company 2 on PS3 selling as well as it did.
And yet, I mean, look, there's a lot of PS3 titles that are in this top 10.
It just kind of came out of nowhere because the 360 and the 360 version did definitely sell better, but the Xbox is kind of the dominant console for shooters. I'm very surprised and impressed to see how well Bad Company 2 did on PS3. I didn't expect
I'm also
any of these numbers.
curious, and I don't think this data is available. How much of these games were bought by people who bought 2 or more of the games here on this top 10? Are you talking about like they've actually gotten that diversified? It's a very impressive March. I think. Actually, it's the May numbers I want to see with all these major games coming out. I mean, if we can sort of see that, hey, you can release a game this time of the year, even 2 weeks apart, and it'll bump up into the top 10. So time will only
Gears of War
tell.
3 is coming in April, so the spring is the new fall.
Spring is, and what is fall?
I don't know.
Is it just the old spring?
I guess
Time where
fall,
everything dies.
fall of 2010 is
Yep.
motion control. Get ready for it.
Hold on, I'm ready.
There you go. Someone make an animated GIF of that.
Speaking of motion control or lack thereof, Roger Ebert. I think none of us actually really want to talk about this, but I think we need to. He did a post.
A follow-up to a post that he had done 3 or 4 years
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that made
4
people
years
really
ago.
cranky. He's probably been getting God knows how many tweets and emails saying you don't know what you're talking about. Da 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 da. He saw Kelly Santiago's presentation from TED and decided, because people I guess have been telling him to watch that, that was trying to make the case that games could be art, and from his assessment of that, it just furthered his, statement that games are not art. Outside of that proclamation alone, there was some well-argued stuff that at least opened up some interesting arguments. There seemed to be stuff that was just outright dismissive, and he has yet to acknowledge that he has played a game, which I think is the core of a lot of frustration for a lot of gamers.
I think, for a lot of people, I think actually constructing a response to what he's talking about has been difficult. I haven't seen a whole lot of actual, constructive responses to what he's saying. But everyone seems to fall back to, and what I fall back to is like he hasn't played it, and I feel like regardless of whether you think it's art or not, but interactivity is so much of what we talk about when we talk about games.
Yeah, it's the experience. It's really not the
Well,
passive.
he made in like a few paragraphs down in the thing a distinction between games you can win, and so maybe Flower isn't a game because you're not necessarily like. Well, I don't think he understands the.
Well, see, the thing is when he was analyzing Kelly's talk, and he said, "Well, in Flower, like she doesn't mention if you can get points or like if you can win." It's like, well, had you just played the game, that would have been answered for you.
Also, looking at Flower and playing Flower, I mean, really,
totally
almost any
different
game out
things.
there are two different experiences.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing too is that like I mean, for most of the games that I play, winning is a foregone conclusion. When I play most of the games that I play, I know I'm going to win. I know at some point down the path I will beat that game and it will be done. And so it actually really is about the experience of playing it, which is I guess that argument just kind of bothered me on that level because I don't think it's fully thought out. And I just like that this says Roger Ebert is a troll. I'm sorry. It's been cracking me up since we started.
Thank you, Andrew Pfister.
I'm sorry.
That was the conclusion I came to yesterday.
Well,
also, he liked Avatar.
I do think he sometimes does go people on. I have always, especially his stuff that isn't a straight review of a movie, but like the 100 greatest movies of all time, and some of his political writing, I think is wonderfully
I've really
structured.
enjoyed some of his stuff.
Very envious of the skills you have out there. I did a soapbox in response to it. I actually done a different soapbox, and then I realized he had done this, and I realized I should respond. The one thing I would say, and I think some people are overreading it, is that I am disinclined to want to call video games art because they do something so different from anything else that we classify as art that I on one level, I wonder if we sell it short. I do think of art as something that's more static, and that's not a perfect definition.
Sure.
But that games create very serious philosophical challenges to anything that we would consider to be art. I'm not saying that they're lesser, but they sure start to blow apart the whole idea
definition,
that no one really has the very same experience as anyone else who buys a particular game. It's all about what they're putting into it. What does that create? I would like to think on some level that Ebert is trying to at least foster some discussion in that direction.
That's what was sort of in my mind, because this is a guy, and again, why people react so violently to the way he proposes this is that because everyone seems to like Ebert on every other level and has such high respect for his opinions that when he does seem so dismissive, which is just not usually his style, that it comes across as really frustrating because it's the medium that we all love. Sure. And so I've to a certain extent I respect what he's done because it's forced people to really sit and here's a guy that you, as opposed to it just being some guy on Fox News or like someone that you don't really respect or don't even have.
It's easy to dismiss them.
It's easy to dismiss them. Roger Ebert's like, I like this guy. If he is able to so casually dismiss games, well, what can I say to change his mind? And so I think to that extent, he has done a good thing in that getting people to sort of step up their game in terms of, well, okay, how can we explain this to people? If we can convince Roger Ebert or at least get him to concede a point, then we've made some progress.
Well, it's also, I've seen a lot of the responses, and to some extent, I really like Kelly Santiago, but I was a little bit concerned that by the games that she chose, the Waco game, Flower, and Braid, those games at least currently are not the norm. They are definitely exceptional. And when you use those as the argument that video games are art, you kind of then dismiss the more conventional games that we have. And I think we need to go back to what is so popular, what is so resonant. There, as I said, there is great artistry. That's indisputable that goes into the design of these games. Where is the art that's inside of them? Don't use the exception because you're actually, I think, can make the video game industry as a whole look like it isn't art. What I was going to ask you, Sterling, what you thought on this is, why is it so important that we call video games art? I mean, it sounds like we're coming from a place of insecurity.
I think so. I think there's artistic merit to games. I think that I'm of the attitude that art is what, maybe this is my loose, broad definition, but it's what you can interpret it to be. If there's something that it elicits out of you, the sort of response it elicits, then perhaps it's art. As for trying to validate what we love and what we do to Roger Ebert, I don't care anymore. Yeah. I'm over it. I'm mentally exhausted with expending energy.
Even with Roger Ebert, you think of like generic parent. Oh, those games are a waste of time, and that's what you want to do. Is like, no, it's art. It's just justifiable.
But here's the thing: all those parents, those generic parents, have Farmville accounts now.
Yeah,
they bought Wii's. We won.
Yeah.
That's how
Yeah.
I look at it.
That's
Plain and
it, yeah.
simple.
I think that he understands too that not every film or movie that he goes to see is art.
Yeah,
so
see, that's
I
the
guess
thing.
that's
He
I guess
said
that's why
very
you
few
want
films are
him
art, yeah.
exactly, which is why I guess you want him in some way to validate. Not all games, just maybe one or two, or like a little slice of that. Because I don't think I think it's very reasonable that he doesn't consider all movies and films art. He even says that actually in the response to Kelly Santiago, where she's talking about the Waco game, where he goes, "Well, I saw a great documentary, about Waco, and it evoked emotional response out of me and everything, but I still wouldn't call it art."
I mean, it's really it's more than a semantic discussion, but really the contest is on that word. It's not on the validation of video games.
Yeah.
And
The discussion will continue.
Yeah.
Somewhere
we
you
like
see
it or
Irvine,
not.
someone is writing something far more well thought out than everything we just said here combined. So what we're going to move on to now this week, this should be fun. We're calling it Question Time. It's like British Parliament, except we're not yelling and we don't have accents and we don't have suits. But it's the next couple of weeks, we're not seeing too many big game releases, so we thought we would open it up to all the wonderful people who seem to be following this show quite loyally.
I don't know what you're thinking.
Yeah, I don't know either. And we invited you to just ask us questions. All we said is, please do not ask us anything about Kingdom Hearts 3 because we don't care yet, because we don't know anything.
Or 3D. Can we not talk about 3D?
We're not going to talk about 3D. And we got some great questions.
Yeah.
The first one I want to start with, because this got me so excited, is Infinity Man. He writes, okay, so the general opinion is that we finally got a good Batman game with Arkham Asylum. So I guess my question is this. How likely do you think it would be to get a good Superman game, and what would it take to make it good? I've seen the previous Superman games listed in many lists of the worst games ever, and I guess what I want to know is this. What has been the failure so far, in your humble opinions, and what could be done to correct it? I love this question because I don't know if a good Superman game is possible because of the nature of the character.
That was exactly
we were
my
talking
answer.
about it on the elevator on the way here. That of all the
He's invincible.
yeah, he's just not the most compelling.
He's not human.
Comic book character.
He has no human qualities.
He was
too
created
good.
in a
I don't
time where that sense of perfection somehow carried the story. But then you could even see in the evolution of Superman, you had to find new excuses of what could actually make him vulnerable. I mean, they only had
Kryptonian
kryptonite,
things.
of
Yeah.
which there was very little.
Yeah.
I think that's ultimately it. Is that a game requires defeat. And just in a traditional sense, and without
Nemesis
without that sense of defeat, or like I could die or lose all my health. It's tough. Like that's for traditional game mechanics. I think that's why they failed, is that they've tried to do a traditional game, and I don't think Superman works in
I
a
don't think it
traditional
works
game.
at all.
Now, of course, Superman 64, it didn't even need Superman to be a failure. I mean, that's still one of the most
not one bit.
astonishing things. I mean, the menacing Lex Luthor put rings in the sky, and you must fly through them.
Why? That sounds terrifying. If you saw rings in the sky, I'd be terrified.
Yeah, you're probably right. I don't know if I'd be like, we must fly through them to save this.
I do think part of it is also the teams they put on the games. You look at like the Superman Returns game. It was a total rush job. I feel like that game was just totally flushed through that EA studio and even though they had to bump it, they still couldn't quite get it right. I think the key to Superman's character and how you make an interesting game out of it almost ties into kind of the eco dynamic. Superman is such this powerful, infallible character that anything that you would do to create dramatic tension would be all about your failure to protect others.
Yeah, no.
Your failure depends on what happens to other people.
It's not you succeeding beating up the bad guy. It's almost like your reputation is more at stake than your life.
Exactly.
I
that would
wondered
be a step.
that, or
towards
like
it.
a Metroid sort of where if you stripped Superman of all of his powers and then you had to acquire them like over a period of time. So like you would just be a strong dude at once, but then if you acquired Superman's different powers and applied them,
Yeah,
but
you
that
do that by
totally
turning the
goes-
sun not yellow. 'Cause
Yeah.
that's what they did in Dark Knight Returns, right?
Wait, what?
When the nuke goes off, the sun changes and suddenly Superman doesn't have his powers.
possibly, yeah.
Yeah,
that-
I think it does come from the
But
color
I
of the
think
sun.
something like sort of Samus, where you have to you start out and if the game opened where you're the super badass and then they strip everything from you and then you have to slowly gain those back. I think that could be something interesting.
Also, you need good flight controls, which
Yeah,
you really,
absolutely.
Yeah.
if for whatever reason, if you're, as we learned with Dark Void, if you're not a plane, it seems to be still very, very challenging to pull that off. So
Yeah.
All right, well, let's move on. Thank you very much, Infinity Man.
Give it to Rocksteady.
Makes
I'll
it
play the
water in
Superman
space.
game.
Yeah. Give
do it
all
now.
superhero games to Rocksteady and just see what they do with them.
Sure.
So ZX2654, I hope that means something to him because it means nothing to us. I've been playing Just Cause 2 lately, and I've noticed that I can't play any game that makes me walk because the grapple hook just lets me point somewhere, then I go there.
True.
Have any games had such an impact on your gaming, and what was it?
The crackdown effect,
No,
where I just didn't want to do anything but I'm like, no, I can get up there. Come on.
That's exactly
Like,
it. It was Crackdown.
Yeah, it was totally Crackdown.
Crackdown kind of broke a lot of open world stuff for me. If it didn't involve like a good soundtrack and carjacking people, like no, I'm like, why can't I jump here? Grand Theft Auto will make the exception. Everything else, I'm like, I want to jump. I want to scale this building.
I just like to
go over
move
here.
fast. Like if I had a choice between being on a sailboat
Yeah.
and being on a motorboat, like I want to be on the one that goes quickly, and like I
With the exception of Bethesda RPGs, I mean, we are watching open world games get bigger and bigger and bigger, yet traversing them seems to be getting increasingly more tedious. It took me like a few hours to realize I should be using the grapple hook to get around Just Cause 2.
But once
getting
it
those
clicks-
jalopies was just a terrible nightmare.
oh yeah.
But I would like specifically with Just Cause 2, like when I was at Captivate and I played Lost Planet 2, which has a grapple. Oh my god, I don't like their grapple at all.
No, me neither.
Well, my
Especially
frustration
after
was
playing Just Cause 2. I'm like, every time I would shoot something, I'm like, why doesn't this work like Just Cause 2? Why doesn't this work like Just Cause 2? It's like, you ruined this for me.
Well, I was playing Splinter Cell, and I kept on trying to use a grapple hook that wasn't even available in the game. I mean, I saw this
that's
ledge,
pretty
and I'm like,
bad.
I want to go. Oh no, I have to actually walk up there. What is this?
That makes sense for
It's so pedestrian.
Thanks, Just
Yeah,
Cause.
well,
And to
even
be
the grapple
honest-
hook in the first one, because I had moments of like just trying to find the place where it was going to catch and actually get me up
the
there.
grapple in Lost Planet's already pretty crappy.
then
to begin
even
with, so-
then I would just fall down, and then I get so frustrated because it took me so damn long to stand back up that
I mean, I,
finished.
the animations of
Sterling?
Lost
Fair
Planet are
enough. I
frustrating.
was,
Chime
also
in
gonna,
here.
I was also going to say Gears of War. The first Gears, the way that everything that they did with the cover system.
Yes.
Rainbow Six Vegas came at the same time, and Rainbow Six Vegas did a lot of amazing stuff with cover. But there was something about playing it
The way
in
you
third person.
stayed in cover.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the way
it's
you,
And funny
satisfying.
enough, I kept on trying to make that happen in Just Cause 2, and that was one of the things that frustrated me.
really.
Cover-
I
No
kept
cover?
on trying to go in the cover.
I actually kind of abandoned cover in Splinter Cell. I was just crouching behind everything, and like Matt was yelling at me, like, "Why aren't you using cover?" And I'm like, "Cause I am. I'm just crouched. It just makes it easier."
Don't
for
you
me to
think there should be DLC for Splinter Cell where Sam Fisher goes to a back doctor? Because you can't do that for that long.
crouch? He must have amazing.
Project,
timing.
Yeah.
Project Natal
Well,
minigame.
you know, his
Crouch-
legs used to be amazing too. I didn't realize until I was going and playing Chaos Theory last week before they shut down Xbox Live. I was like, oh yeah, the splits thing. I forgot about
That's
that.
right. He's a very nimble man. Yeah. Crouching.
You're
Fisher
you're admiring.
hidden
You're
sciatica.
admiring Sam Fisher right now, aren't you?
Yeah, well, hey, I'm crotchety and all twisted and contorted on the inside.
Crotchety. As we're talking about.
Hey,
doing
get
the
off of my
splits.
lawn there, Patrick. Get off of my lawn.
Damn kids.
All right. Moving on. Gaff writes, with games like Brink proposing to merge single-player and multiplayer gaming through a drop-in, drop-out system, do you think this is a model that others will choose to pursue, or will distinct barriers remain between single-player and multiplayer aspects? I know multiplayer is becoming the de facto standard these days, to the point where one of my friends refuses outright to play any game unless it has a multiplayer component.
Friend is wrong.
Yeah, your friend... People who make rules
Tell your
like
friend
that.
he's wrong
Anyway.
for me.
But so far, there's traditionally been a wall separating those two parts of the game. Is that wall about to become tumbling down? I like this question. Brink is moving in places that has been proposed with other games. What was it, Huxley?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And that thing sure
Yeah,
turned
no,
into
yeah.
something way different than what it was supposed to be. It's very ambitious, and I think from a resource and design standpoint, it's a kind of like that's what people want. But how do we
That's a
get
tough
there
one.
without bankrupting ourselves and taking 10 years to get there and doing it? So
Brink is a really. I imagine a lot of developers are going to be watching how that game plays out, because I'm sure a lot more developers would love to do that, because in a certain sense that kind of halves off some development time if you can do both of them at the same time.
Yes.
If you already have sort of the principled concepts in place, but actually making that work and not. I guess with that, compromising both, like you could end up ruining both by not servicing either.
I think a lot of it's going to come down to where do you make. You can't do it perfectly.
You have to make concessions, so where do you make
you have to
them?
make the right concession that doesn't feel like you've undone the game.
and my
in the
guess is,
process.
I don't know how you don't make concessions in the single player to service the multiplayer.
I don't, it's a kind of weird example of this, but in a way, what Star Wars The Old Republic is doing, where you essentially could play through by yourself and do this kind of like really in-depth single player
Which
campaign.
makes me really excited.
I know, for
First
every
MMO
character
I will ever
in
play
it.
if that's what they let me do.
And then
because
also,
it's really just a mo. That's why.
and then also
I just
you're
want
able
another Knights of the
to
Old Republic.
share it with friends and kind of enjoy. Like,
Yeah.
that actually makes that game so much more compelling.
Yeah,
to
the
me.
idea that you can do
Like,
whatever
the
you want,
same-
but then if you choose to join up with people, it's not it's not a requirement. It's just like that's something
Yeah.
fun I could do right now because my friends are also online. That would be the perfect
but
balance.
then again, you look at like how many resources. I mean, EA and BioWare say it's the most ambitious game that either company has ever made. So you have to think that we're probably not going to see that much of the integration.
Sterling, I was going to point to. Hopefully, he's overstating it, but yeah, when I hear about this friend who only buy a game with multiplayer, this guy and others like him is why we see crap multiplayer added onto games that don't need it and probably ended up suffering the single player in the
Yeah,
process.
but-
I'm
because
inclined to completely agree with
Yeah.
that.
But it's just, I wish I could get a better understanding of the mentality that, like, I guess this goes back to our Roger Ebert discussion, is that if you're just looking at the game as a product, and there it's just like, oh, I need my value add or else it's not worth my time, then, well, yeah, you're making Ebert's point right for him.
Yeah.
That we're
Yeah,
buying a product, we're not buying an experience, a
yeah,
culture.
you are quantifying fun rather than pointing
Yeah.
at looking into the quality of what makes it fun. When he asks about the wall coming tumbling down, I hope it stays intact.
Yeah.
And that's also crazy to me because if you really are purchasing, only games that have multiplayer components, are you actually playing the multiplayer for these games a lot? Like, I mean, did you really
Like
sit
Fear
down?
too?
Did you play the? Did you sit down and did you play the Condemned multiplayer a lot?
Yeah.
Did you play the BioShock multiplayer a lot? And like, I mean, clearly, like each game that has a multiplayer aspect will have a community behind that. And I'm not saying that like, yes, certain ones are better than other ones. Yes, it's just like.
I wonder.
Are you? I mean, like, I don't understand how you could play all of those and go, well, clearly this was a valuable addition to my game, not just something that I played for a week or two, decided I was kind of bored with it, and moved on. Like, is that value?
You know
I
what
don't want to. I don't want to
Patrick.
make an assumption about how young this person's friend is, but based on like the younger members of my like extended family, it's the younger kids. This tends to be like a little more common. They don't care as much about the single player, or the single player is training wheels for the multiplayer. Whereas I tend to play single player games, then move on.
Now, do you get the sense that over time they will mature into wanting more of that?
I think it's just like when we were younger, multiplayer wasn't as common. Multiplayer was sort of an interesting thing that was on some games.
It didn't exist.
It didn't exist.
No.
Imagine
You,
that
it
world.
did for me.
Yeah.
I mean, what age are we talking
Back
about?
in the cave.
Is that your Batman voice?
That's my old man from the future.
It's terrible.
The past.
I played my
heart.
RPGs and they were called MUDs and they were text based.
Yeah, I think it's part of a perception, and then also like when I was younger, I didn't care as like I didn't quantify as we're talking about like the quantity or the product or quality. It was like I don't know. When I was 13, I didn't think of games that way. It was just like
I just borrowed whatever I could so I could
I just
have
get-
something to play.
Same here.
I just get the assumption that the kid might be younger, and that's something
true. That's true.
multiplayer is a big focus.
But
for
I
kids
also look
that are
at
in-
like games that came out when I was a kid, and most of them also weren't even, I don't know, and 15th of the length of games.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, oh my
Yeah.
God, if you bought a game and it lasted for like
Or
40 minutes
well
now,
designed.
you'd be like, this is a 1.
Well,
Get it out of here.
I
But,
think
like,
it's a
those are
very.
great.
I think it's a very similar mentality to like the score obsession.
Yeah,
The people
no,
are like,
yes, yes,
I
yes.
don't buy a game unless it's below this score, and if it's below this score, then it is not worth my time, my money, this or that. Again, quantifying instead of qualifying.
Young people, you're young, experience things. It's for people like me. I'm supposed to be like, no, I hate the letter E, and if I see it in any more game titles, I won't play them anymore.
I'm getting a lot of crotchety Adam this episode.
I don't know.
Well, guess
It's
who's not
rainy
playing Red Dead
outside. I don't know. Although the one thing is, I don't know if Gaff's friend is all that young, because Gaff has a very well-written question right here, and unless his friend's about half his age,
enough.
that's kind of worrisome, Gaff.
We didn't mean to go into that territory with our analysis.
Way to make
but
everything
anyway,
creepy.
I want to move on because I love this. Warden626, he's talking about Greg Kasavan, who is a long friend of mine. We used to work about 8 feet away from one another because, for whatever reason, GameSpot was literally inside of Tech TV, even though we had nothing to do with one another. So, anyway, Greg Kasavan, a producer for 2K Games, recently posted on his personal blog about the lack of believable villainy in most video games today. He argues that the best villains are the ones that impose their will upon the player throughout the course of the game, but remain inaccessible until near the end, such as in Batman Arkham Asylum and BioShock. Would you agree with Kasavan's assessment? Moreover, do you feel the growth and popularity of large open-world sandbox games has put less focus on a strong narrative and therefore less interesting antagonists? Is there a trend of games choosing to either focus on a strong story or being open to the player, or can both desires be met? I think these are both great questions.
Very much
With the,
so.
Really
with the
good.
first one, I would immediately point to, especially in the case of Bioshock versus Bioshock 2. Now, the big sister, the first time you encounter her, is a terrifying, awesome experience. Now, by the time you encounter her the fifth or sixth time, she's, it's just another enemy type.
I know how to
that you
kill them
have to-
so fast at this
Yeah,
point.
it's just,
basically.
it's another enemy type. And had that maybe been an encounter at the beginning and an encounter at the end, and like, occasionally, like I had thought that like that villain was going to be something that was like a cinematic that I encountered, and I'm scared, and maybe I fight them a little bit. But instead, it became an enemy type and devalued that.
But just like in the same way in the first Bioshock, they did make the Big Daddy like the ultimate enemy. And it was
Right.
just more or less like, I better think here because there's a good chance I'm going to die.
Right.
But yeah, obviously, I assume what he's referring to is, who's the big bad guy in Bioshock?
Andrew Ryan.
Andrew Ryan.
Ryan,
Thank you.
yeah.
Just completely. I want to say Anne Rand. I couldn't do the thing.
They are
But
similar.
it is
The Thing?
like her and Joker.
Yeah.
They just kind of stood there. They made his world nightmarish. Problem was, I gotta say, in Batman, it was great until Joker did show up, and then it was
Yeah,
like,
and his
this
end
is
boss
not
was
what
terrible.
I want.
Yeah.
Is that it just that's always such a tough character because you want the villainy and you want kind of the crazy, and it just went a little bit to the crazy, and then that means it goes right into the campy,
Right.
and then you're
Yeah.
fighting, big Joker.
But
Yeah.
I think the inaccessibility also stems. I guess I could see where Greg's coming from to a regard. That's like a very old school approach to games. If you look back at the old 8-bit games, or even going back to just storytelling, watching cartoons as a kid, it was always some little like dwarfy villain that was meting out all this punishment and creating all these obstacles to the hero. And by the time you finally got your hands on them, you wanted to kick the crap out of them.
Yeah, it's
And I think that you don't see that as much in games now. And actually, I will say, going back and tying that into what he's saying about open world games, I noticed when I was playing Ballad of Gay Tony, there was a moment towards the early part of the game where Luis goes and he's trying to help his mother out, who's caught up with some loan shark. And I noticed when I was reviewing the PS3 version, I kept failing the mission because I got so pissed off, I kept killing the loan shark. And I realized that was one of the weak elements of that game for me was they didn't resolve that plot. Because in a lot of the stuff with Grand Theft Auto and the way it's so heavily driven on story, you get resolution. So if there's somebody who is making your life a living hell in those games in some way, you usually will find a way to get that person their comeuppance, even if it's dozens of hours later. And I felt like that was something that really aggravated me about Gay Tony was I can't finally get revenge on this loan shark for terrorizing my character's mother. But you know what? I already know how this goes down. I just shot the dude and repeatedly beat his corpse in the street.
see good
And
for
I
you.
felt a little better.
Healthy.
Now, I mean, with
catharsis.
the open world games, and we've talked about this too, that it tends to weaken the narrative. Even in games that are as narrative heavy as Grand Theft Auto, you can have such a vast and diverse narrative that just it almost dilutes itself. You can have great moments, but the totality sometimes doesn't feel as impressive. I mean, it's.
Then it comes
Well,
down
sure,
to
it's
the
hard
Is
to-
it an either or?
No, I think it comes down to the world at that point because
Yeah.
then the stories in the world or your actions become the story that fills in the gaps in between the narrative stuff. And that's why one of the things I didn't like about Grand Theft Auto 4 was that the world itself wasn't nearly as interesting, or I wasn't as compelled to just get out of my car and not do missions and just blow things up. I pretty much just stuck to the narrative. But a game like Fallout 3 that we always come back to, like my in-between stuff was so interesting, and the stories I had with people filled in all of the stuff that wasn't there as I was traversing the wasteland.
In terms of challenge at the end, there really wasn't much of a denouement. There was a sense of closure to the story.
Yeah.
And there was a big thing that happened at the end. But yeah, it was.
Are we not spoiling Fallout 3?
I think we're allowed to.
Yeah.
No, I haven't
I mean,
beat it
Spoiler,
yet.
its ending sucked.
Oh, crap. Thanks, Patrick.
Yeah, but then
It's
you
okay,
get
just
broken,
get broken steel
Yeah, then
and
you
it
get broken
doesn't
steel and it's all
It's
fixed.
a level
So,
cap. No, I know.
It's. I mean that. I guess. I mean. I think it ties in. Excuse me. Into the boss battle. We always think that's how it has to end. The most challenging thing has to happen at the end of the game.
I would love to
And some
see-
games are pulling away from that logic.
Yeah.
You do not need to end boss battle because end boss battles end so many games on a sour
I mean, we
note.
brought it up with God of War 3, where it's like, after all that, it's like, well, I don't really.
Well, look at the
Zeus-
first Bioshock. Everything that they'd built up to in Bioshock, everything that you finally got to, and it was like, Wow, that was
And,
fast.
and Ken Levine said, like, I just thought that's what you do in a console game. You need an end boss.
Well, and then if you look at, I think that the only other thing that we see is in Grand Theft Auto, your final boss battle is just a horribly challenging and painful sequence of challenges.
Yeah.
Yeah, getting on that motorcycle just, it hurt.
How many times I tried the end boss battle of Metroid Prime 3 on Veteran? Like the hardest difficulty.
Yeah.
I think I spent something like
Yeah.
I probably spent longer trying to beat that boss than I
the rest
did
of the
actually
game.
playing the game.
Now, one thing I do like, this is one of the few times I thought it worked, was in the original Resistance. There was no proper boss battle, but there was, you got all your weapons, we're going to give you a lot of enemies, you have a small task you have to accomplish, but it's more or less like, use all your skills that you've learned to hold off swarms while getting something done, rather than, we're going to create something
really big with a
Yeah.
big weak point that you gotta
Yeah,
shoot for
it's
2
just
minutes.
Because I actually love that. I love the 3-tiered kind of Nintendo boss battle system where you know that you're going to use all the skills that you acquired. You know that there's going to be a pattern to it, that it's going to. And part of me still really, really, really enjoys all of that. I mean, to bring it back to Final Fantasy, part of the reason I like that is because they're all kind of boss battles. Half of what I'm fighting, I really have to think about the pattern that I'm using, what I'm switching to, like how I'm doing it. It's like each one is its own individual puzzle, which I know Adam always goes, that sounds terrible. And I'm like, I love it.
That sounds terrible.
Because for most games, for most games, what are you going to do? You're either going to beat the shit out of whatever is at the end of the game, or you're going to shoot him. I mean, or find a couple different ways to shoot him. Like there's not anything compelling really left to do with that. I
think it's less just like it's a leftover sort of like old school Miyamoto expectation that you have to have a boss that you fight in tiers, and then
when that's done well,
when
it
it's
is
done
awesome.
well, it's great. But I think games need to get away from the idea that that's what you have to do. That's what ruined.
Well, also,
that's what ruined
in games
Joker,
that are trying to offer up realism or something,
Right.
the 3-tiered thing kind of stands out like, well, that's kind of weird. When it is in, like, especially a Nintendo-type world, it's like, that's perfect. I mean, 3D Game Heroes is a perfect example. It's like, it's like, it is an archetype we like, but it's only suitable in certain contexts.
And it gets abused so much.
Oh, yes.
And half the time it's just not interesting because you've done it so... If you've been playing Nintendo games since you were a kid, you've done it so many times. And for somebody to do something new and interesting with it is rare.
That would be nice. I want to get to our last question. Very tough one. It's from DT Football 2007.
Oh, God. I'm not ready for this.
Ready?
No.
Who has the better fro, Sterling or Patrick?
Oh, God.
See, I don't even know if you two can vote
Yeah, I
in
don't
this.
think. All right, go.
You really... No. Yeah. Take your headphones off.
I'm gonna have to
Yeah, everybody's...
You have to
No, we have
puff
to
it out.
de-headphone.
Problem is, like, I didn't like.
You have very different froze.
We do.
I mean, I love Sterling's height and volume.
How long would it be if you stretched out an individual piece of hair?
Like down to that's like a shorter one. This is
Now-
so awkward.
Now, what Patrick has is that it's kind of wild man. Like, there's danger in that hair.
Well, yeah, I'm a dangerous guy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like you're like,
I know what
oh,
I'm
I'm crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I have 2 or 3 cups of coffee this morning.
Now I'm just running around going like this.
Infinity Ward.
See, I'm also I have a handicap because usually if I like blow dry it in the morning, then it's like Lion King. But I didn't do that. I didn't do that this morning.
Oh, I
do that
I had this
tomorrow?
whole song in my head called "The Sterling of Life."
Oh,
It's going to be a big hit. With
That's okay.
only
Adam will feel awkward when we make him play Just Dance.
Yes,
later.
yes. I have been
That sounds
challenged to.
fantastic.
I've
10
challenged Adam to spend a significant
We
period
may,
of time dancing.
if we can, we're going to incorporate
On
this
camera.
into next week's show.
Yeah.
So,
Oh,
ding,
gauntlet's
ding,
been thrown down.
Yes.
We even have a song chosen, but we'll make that a surprise.
yes, Ubisoft was
It's
kind
only,
enough
there's
to
like
send us
30
a copy.
songs in the game you can go through and guess.
Abby,
All right.
Abby, did you bring our surprise? Did you forget your surprise?
It's sitting up on the desk, but we just talked about it because it's Just Dance, and because
Yes.
it came to me this morning. It was sent to Adam, and it came to me because he was off doing something and he was busy. So I got it in my head that I really think that we need like 10 minutes of Adam dancing.
Yeah.
And I've taken up your challenge.
Okay,
I am
good.
very interested in this game. I asked Ubisoft to send a copy because it has been so popular. I should not act like Roger Ebert and think I am so grand. It is beneath my time or interest, and I am going to check
Adam,
out
cover-
the Just
Adam,
Dance.
cover
You're not
your
too
ears
well
for a
read
second.
for Just Dance.
Okay, I'm covering my ears.
If anybody on the internet is really good at making like animated GIFs,
Yeah, this is gonna be a good one.
I could have. That must have been all nice talk that happened. Okay, with that, we leave you on a cliffhanger. Will this happen for next week? There's only one way you can find out, and that is by checking out feedback. Of course, it always goes up on the website on Wednesdays. If you're a big fan of the show, please let others know that you like the show. We would love others to watch it as well, because we're like a big happy family. So use that Facebooking thing, that Whatever all that stuff is.
Better, really.
Are we gonna have to
yeah,
censor that?
that was bad.
Are we gonna have to censor that?
Joe's nodding. Yes, we're going to have to censor
It's
that.
gonna be awesome when the other social network is something that's censored out.
Yeah. Use that stuff that you do to talk to the people.
The boner
quickly.
jam.
The boner
Your
jam.
Facebook.
All right. With this, it's clearly gotten out of control. We'll see you all next week.
Facebook and
Hello there. I'm Adam Sessler, host of X-Play, editor-in-chief at G4TV.com. I talk a lot about video games, and sometimes a camera is in front of me when I'm doing that. We call that Sessler's Soapbox. It takes about 2 minutes of your time, but trust me, you will hear invective and joy and probably a lot of rude things like you've never heard before in the context of video games. I do it for you, so you should check it out. It's up every Tuesday on G4TV.com.